Today we're taking a look at Avengers Infinity War, and I am so excited about this because I love the Avengers films. They're always full of superheroic action, they're always so upbeat, with lots of lovable characters. Would you guys excuse me for a second? Hey! Sorry about that. I had to walk the earth on an emotional journey in order to finally come to terms with the fact that Disney just spent 10 years making me fall in love with these toys that they themselves proceeded to break within 2.5 hours. Avengers Infinity War is a crazy experiment. It's the conclusion to the storyline that has been playing out in the background for the past 10 years across 18 other movies. Never before in the history of not just superhero movies, but the history of movies in general have we ever seen anything like this. This villain has been getting hyped up for years. These heroes have been building up relationships and histories with us for a decade. This mission to find the Infinity Gems has been implanted into our mind again and again every time we've gone to the cinema, and that's the first thing I have to say about this movie. If you have not been following the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you don't already know all these characters, this movie is not for you. I have read so many negative reviews that say there isn't much story here, there's too many heroes, there's no character development, there's too much fighting, and you know something? They kind of have a point. There isn't much character development in here. The story is really quickly just moving from one thing onto the next, and it's not that complex. And there is tons of action in here, probably more than in any other Marvel film, and especially on a scale that we haven't seen in any other Marvel film. But here's the thing. That was the point! The character development that you were looking for, it's known as the 18 other movies that came before this. Yes, they never stopped to introduce any characters, and that's because they've already been introduced. And this movie does follow the traditional 3-act structure, but it's very subtle. To most audiences out there, this won't feel like 3 acts, it'll feel more like just one string of events going from one place into the next, but there's a reason for that. It's because this entire movie is Act 3. It's the finale to another movie that was made up of 18 other movies. I love when movies try new stuff, when they attempt to be experimental, and it is honestly shocking to me that one of the boldest experiments in cinematic history is a superhero movie made by Disney. But even the people who understood what this movie was, that it was all one big Act 3 with established characters from pre-existing films, that it was meant to be watching dominoes fall over that we spent a decade setting up, even those fans have complained that there's too many characters to keep track of, and sometimes it can feel hectic and spastic trying to follow them all. And I can understand that, but honestly, I didn't have that problem. I was able to follow it just fine. Now, granted, that might be because before this movie came out, I spent the entire week rewatching every single Marvel film back to back to back to back, so I was mentally prepared to deal with all these characters, but honestly, I think they did a great job balancing them all and mixing and matching them for each of the 3 various missions that we followed them through. Now, so far I've mostly been defending this movie against the critiques that it's gotten, but what's actually good about it? What are the actual compliments that I can give this film? Well, as long as we're talking about the characters, I'll go ahead and say they nailed each and every one of them. That was honestly one of my favorite things about the first Avengers film, that it was able to take these characters from pre-existing films and bring them into this one team film and make them each feel like the characters from those other movies. It made it feel like these weren't brand new characters created for this team-up film, it made it feel like they were the characters from a cinematic universe. However, that was just Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man. This movie does that with about 20 characters, and it does it even better than the first Avengers film. It's incredible to me that Black Panther, Captain America, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Rocket Raccoon, and so many other characters can all be in the same movie together, and these filmmakers found a way to make that feel natural without having to sacrifice any of their characteristics that define them from the previous films. In fact, in many ways, keeping them true to themselves helped to define them even more when they started to interact. Because I remember when I saw Doctor Strange, I thought, wow, he's kind of just Tony Stark all over again, but with magic. But when you actually see Doctor Strange next to Tony Stark and the two of them interact, you realize, oh, I was way off. These guys are still acting exactly like they did in their own movies, and they're clearly very different characters. And what makes that really impressive to me is that they were able to keep each character's unique sense of humor. Yes, the Marvel films have always been known for having a strong sense of humor. Even their most dramatic movies will have a solid joke here or there. But the sense of humor for each of these characters is always different. However, in this movie, they were able to take every single one of these unique senses of humor and bring them together for one film, and it never feels out of place. Thor's Surfer Bro jock style of comedy from Thor Ragnarok is in here. The Guardians collection of goofball style comedy exists. Tony Stark is still, well, Tony Stark. They were able to get every single one of these characters' style of comedy down packed, which is exactly why this movie is so soul-crushingly dramatic. Yeah, don't get confused. Just because this movie has jokes doesn't mean it isn't dark. In fact, this is one of the darkest superhero movies I've ever seen, and the jokes don't take away from that, they add to it. This is the lesson that so many other superhero movies that try to be dark and serious and depressing, and I don't have to say which ones I'm talking about because you all know which ones I'm talking about, need to understand. You need jokes, you need light, you need hope. You can't just keep slapping people down for 2 hours straight, they're going to get numb to it. You need to lift people back up so you can then slap them down all over again, and this movie understands that balance perfectly. Every single time that I got tense in this movie, the movie would then relax me, so I would get even more tense 5 minutes later. You can't just keep giving people emotional gut punches over and over and over again. If you do that, eventually they're going to develop abs of steel and they're not going to feel anything down there anymore. This movie realizes if you're going to give someone an emotional gut punch, you need to then relax them by massaging their shoulders, give them a nice drink, put some icy hot on those wounds. Also, that way when I stand back up, I'm gonna, I said gut punch! But what about Thanos, the big villain himself? People have always complained about the Marvel villains, and while I think they actually do have several good ones, about half of them, yeah, they're pretty lame, and Thanos has been getting built up for 6 years. We've been teasing this guy non-stop since the end of the first Avengers film, making him out to be the biggest, baddest threat in the universe. It would be so easy to drop the ball on him with that much buildup, because even if he was good, people would walk out of there saying, yeah, he was good, but was he worth all that? Did he really meet the hype? But Thanos isn't just good, he's great. He breaks onto the scene like he just got into prison by taking out the biggest guys he can find and lets everyone know this is the kind of threat that I am. I don't mess around. You get to understand that immediately. But it's not just his power level that's impressive. No, he's actually quite eloquent. When he talks, you pay attention. Josh Brolin captures every scene he's in as Thanos, and a lot of that has to do with how well animated he is. He feels real. When he's on stage, you feel like you're looking at an 8-foot-tall purple madman. And his motivation? Yes, it's different from what it is in the comics, but that motivation from the comics would be really hard to pull off in a movie, so the new motivation actually works even better. It makes you think you're kind of making sense, but you're so insane and sociopathic that I hate even saying that. And when people talk about this movie not having a story to it, for the heroes, sure, it's pretty basic, but Thanos himself does have an arc. He does go on a journey. He does have development. This, in many ways, is kind of his movie. It's not just a film full of explosions and going from one place to the next. However, there are a bunch of explosions going from one place to the next, but here's the thing. That's not a negative. Again, that actually works considering what this movie is. This movie revisits many characters and locations we've come to know and love from the previous films, and speaking as someone who just watched all these movies again, I did get flashbacks to this franchise's long history as I watched this, but these scenes don't work just because of nostalgia. It works because this movie is saying, hey, look back at this long road that you've traveled. Look back at everything that you've seen and done, and now realize that as you were walking that path, we were sprinkling gasoline along the trail as you went, and now Thanos is here to light a match and burn it all down. And to me, that's what makes this movie work so well. It's that this entire film is Disney saying, hey, look at all the stuff that we made you love over the past 10 years. Look at all the characters, the supporting cast members, the locations that over the course of 18 movies, we have made you fall in love with. Now, for our next trick, we're going to destroy all of that. If you are a huge fan of the Marvel films, you're going to get the most entertainment out of this movie, but you're also going to have your heart broken. At the end of every Marvel film I've ever seen, the audience would applaud. It didn't matter how good or how bad it was, the moment those credits start rolling, the audience would cheer. When these credits start rolling, you could hear a pin drop. I have never been in a theater that silent. Even when I saw A Quiet Place, the audience was not that quiet. And it's because this movie will leave you an emotional wreck. Which sure, doesn't sound very fun, but the point of art isn't to be fun. The point of art is to make you feel something. And this movie does that masterfully. In fact, I honestly don't really have any complaints about this movie, aside from just a couple nitpicks about how Thanos' henchmen weren't really that developed. I gotta say it. To me, this movie is perfect. Actually, I can't do that. I want to so bad, but I can't give this movie a perfect score. Why? Because tiny, teeny, little itsy bitsy, spoiler alert, but not really, because literally every single other critic out there has gone ahead and talked about this. But it does sort of have something to do with the story, so if you want to avoid everything on this, then tune out now. But remember when Kevin Feige said that this was going to be a two-parter? Then the directors, the Russo brothers, came out and said, no, it is not going to be a two-parter, it's going to be just one part. The lies on them boys. This is a two-parter, and yes, this movie right here, I got no complaints, but for me to give it a perfect score when we don't know how the full story is going to end, don't get me wrong, there is an ending to this movie, but it is not the end of the story. And I feel like for me to give it a perfect score without knowing how the story ends, I just can't bring myself to do that. So, we will wait for a year from now, when part 2 comes out, for me to finally figure out what my score of this movie is going to be. So for now, we're just gonna sit here and wait and think about this film. That is a long ass time to just think about how depressing this movie is. When does Deadpool come out? Hey, thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you like this review, then hit that subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, then check out the Amazon link below. Follow that link, and if you buy anything at all on Amazon, as long as you start by going through that link, then we get a cut of the profits. It's a great way to treat yourself and support the channel at the same time. And if you want to hear our spoiler talk from this movie, then it's popping up right over there. And you can always follow us around the web on Twitch and Twitter at Professor Thorgi. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Come back next time.